Now the author says, I was really worried about Tricky this time. I had pulled up my car when I saw him in the street with his mistress, the owner. I was shocked at his appearance. The author is actually the veterinary this doctor. He is driving his car and he's so much shocked that he stopped his car and looked at the lady as well as the dog, and he really became anxious. He had become ugly, fat, like a bloated, swollen sausage kind of a dish, So sausage are, these are very bloated kind of appearance, they look very fat, the sausages. So they are looking, this dog is looking like a sausage with the leg at each corner. His eye is bloodshot and rheumy. His eyes are like, red. The dog's condition was so bad. All these adjectives in this description is telling that the badly, physical condition that the dog was actually into. Stared straight ahead and tongue lolled from his jaws, and his tongue is just lolling, lifelessly, just like that. Mrs. Pumphrey hastened to explain. He was so listless, Mr. Harriet. He seemed to have no energy, and Mrs. Pumphrey is just explaining this to Mr. Harriet, who's actually the narrator of the story. And she says that, sir, he is so full of laziness and he has got no energy, so that's how I'm just trying to cooperate. I thought he must be suffering from malnutrition and I brought him to you because he is actually suffering and he has got some kind of malnutrition. How can it be malnutrition? The dog is so fat. The dog is not thick or skinny. The dog is so fat, and still it is because of the blind love of this lady that she's saying my dog must be suffering by the malnutrition because he is not moving. The dog is not moving because of excessive fat, that the dog has in his body. So I've been giving him some little extra between meals to build him some malt and cod liver oil and bowl of Horlicks at night to make him sleep. Nothing much really. And sir, he's not eating much, just Horlicks and all this and all this and all this. This is too much, but still she says nothing much because of the love. And did you cut down on the sweet things I told you? I already told you that you should not give him much sweet. Are you cutting down? Did you stop giving him sweets? Oh, I did for a bit, but he seemed to be so weak. Sir, I started, but then, he's so weak. So I had to relent. I had to give up, and then I started giving him sweets also. He does love cream cakes and chocolate, so I can't bear to refuse him. So my dog loves actually the cream cakes and chocolate, so that I'm not stopping. Naturally, this dog is going to fall sick because of such overeating. I looked down again at the little dog, and then this doctor looked at the Mr. Harriet, the doctor, the neighbor also of Mrs. Pumphrey, and he just looked at the dog and said, that was the trouble. Tricky's only fault was greed. He had never been known to refuse food. He would tackle a meal at any hour of the day or night. Anytime he's ready to eat. That's the problem. He thought in his own mind. He did not say this to Mrs. Pumphrey, but this is what he's thinking. And I wondered about all the things Mrs. Pumphrey hadn't mentioned. And he's wondering that this is less she's telling. That dog must be eating a lot more than what is being told. Are you giving him plenty of exercise? Do you take him to exercise? Well, he has little walks. He goes for some walks with me, as you can see now. But Hawkin, the gardener, had been down with lumbago, which is a disease in the pain, muscle pain. That's why there has been no ring throwing. Now he's not going for the exercises because our gardener is not well, suffering through some with some pain in the muscles in the leg. That's why he's not able to go. So that's why he's just managing some walks with me, small walks. I tried to sound severe. Now this doctor spoke little strictly, sharply. Now I really mean this. If you don't cut his food right down and give him more exercises, he's going to be really ill. I'm telling you, Mrs. Pumphrey, that if you don't cut down his food and not giving much exercise, your dog is going to fall ill very badly. You must harden your heart and keep him on a very strict diet, and you should be keeping your dog on dieting and be little stone-hearted. I know you love your dog, but then you have to, for his sake, stop giving him much food, otherwise he'll seriously fall sick. Mrs. Pumphrey wrung her hands and she just, kind of gave expression, yes, I'll do that. Oh, I will, Mr. Harriet. I'm sure you're right, but it is so difficult, so very difficult. She set off, head down along the road as if determined to put the new regime into practice immediately. And, she's behaving as if she's going, yes, yes, sir, I will give him diet and all that. Don't worry. And they walked as if now only from today itself, this lady is going to put the dog into dieting as well as on exercise, but that's not going to happen. The doctor, Mr. Harriet, knows it very well. Within no time, a call will come that this dog is suffering badly because that dog was excessively eating. He was actually overeating dog, and that's why this dog was going to fall sick, and Mr. Harriet knew it quite well. I watched the progress growing concern. Tricky was tottering, unwillingly walking along in this little tweed coat. He had a typical coat. He had a whole wardrobe of these coats. That's where we see the love of this lady towards the dog. This mistress had got the entire wardrobe for this dog. Cold weather, different clothes, raincoat, wet days. For the wet days, he had a raincoat, and cold weather, he had a different coat and all that. He struggled on, drooping in his harness, and the stripe, the belt with which they tie the dog, he's not able to fix in there because of the oversize. It becomes so fat. I thought it would not be long before I heard from Mrs. Pumphrey, and the doctor was very sure that he's very soon going to get a call from Mrs. Pumphrey that dog is severely ill. The expected call came within a few days, and his expectation was right. Within a few days, the call came. Mrs. Pumphrey was distraught. Distraught means excessively worried. Tricky would eat nothing, sir. My dog had stopped eating. Refused even his favorite dishes. He's not even eating his favorite. This part is very interesting, how she's explaining the illness. And besides, he had bouts of vomiting, and he's, vomiting and all that. He spent all his time lying on a rug, and he keeps lying on one rug, panting and gasping for air. Did not want to go for walks, did not want to do anything. He's just simply lying. I had made my plans in advance. Doctor had already decided that after some days, this lady will come reporting the sickness of the dog, and then I will start my treatment. The doctor had already made his plan the very day when he saw the dog on the road. The only way was to get Tricky out of the house for a period. And doctor knew the best treatment that this dog needed was to take the dog out of the house so that he stops overeating and does exercising. I suggested that he did not say anything to Mrs. Pumphrey that he was to be put to exercise or cut down on his diets and all that. He simply told her, your dog is critically ill and we need to hospitalize the dog for about a fortnight to be kept under observation. We have to keep this dog under observation for a period of fortnight, which is 15 days. The poor lady almost swooned, and this lady was almost fainted. Fainted means she was so much in love with the dog, excess of love, that she said, oh my God, and she started fainting, hearing that the dog will be away from her for a period of 15 days. She was sure he would pine and die if he did not see her every day. And she was very sure that the dog will be under great pain, big pain. She would pine, crave for me and die if he does not see me. Doctor, please don't take him away. My dog will die if he doesn't see me. Please, doctor, and all that. But I took a firm line. But the doctor was resolute. He said, no, if you want the treatment, the only treatment is that he has to be hospitalized. Tricky was very ill, and this was the only way to save him. In fact, I thought best to take him without delay. He should take him immediately. Otherwise, the dog will die. And followed by Mrs. Pumphrey's wailing. And Mrs. Pumphrey started wailing, shouting, oh my God, you're taking my dog away, my poor baby, like that. I marched out to the car carrying the little dog wrapped in the blanket, and the doctor took the dog. The entire staff was roused, and Mrs. Pumphrey called the entire staff. Bring this for my dog, bring that chocolate, bring that cloth. As if some boy is going, some small baby is going to the hospital or to a hostel. That's what, how mothers react when the children, actually small children, are sent to the hostels. So that's how, she's reacting when this dog is going to the hospital, not the hostel, of course. But then that's how the mothers behave when the children go to the hostels, that's how. So the entire staff was roused and the maids rushed in, bringing day bed, night bed, favorite cushions, toys, rubber rings, breakfast bowl, lunch bowl, supper, different kind of bowls he had for the the different meals, Such much pampered the dog was. Realizing that my car would never hold all the stuff, I started to drive. The doctor knew that so much of this, things will not be there in his car. There is no space, so that's why the doctor started driving. Just took the dog. As I moved off, Mrs. Pumphrey, with a despairing cry, threw an armful of the little coats, and then she threw at least some coats through the window. I looked in the mirror before, and in the mirror, side mirror, he could see everybody was crying in tears on the road. I glanced down at the pathetic little animal gasping on the seat by my side, and the dog is just gasping, panting. I patted the head, and Tricky made a brave effort to wag his tail, and Tricky just made some effort, brave effort. Even moving his tail was a brave effort for him. This much fatty and, this much, this dog has become completely he's not moving at all, so lazy that it was a brave effort that this dog at least wagged his tail. Poor old lad. And then the doctor in the car, when he's taking him to the hospital, spoke to this dog. You haven't a kick in you, you have no energy in you, but I think I know a cure for you. No improvement, but I have a cure for you. At the surgery, the hospital, the household dog surged round me, and when he reached the hospital, the place where the dogs were kept, all the dogs, came and then welcomed this Tricky. Tricky looked down at the noisy pack of dogs. A group of dogs is called, even the pack of wolves is a term used in English language. Pack means a group, especially when the dogs or the wolves, when they come in a kind of a team, we don't call them a team or a flock or something, we call them a pack. So the pack is the typical word, a kind of noun which reflects the group. Tricky looked down at the noisy pack with dull eyes and when put down lay motionless in the carpet. But Tricky was just, very lazily just laying on the motionless on the carpet. The other dogs sniffing around after him for a few seconds decided he was an uninteresting object and ignored him. The dogs came and sniffed. Sniffed means smelled him, and they thought that he is very lazy dog. So they did not take much interest when other dogs were also there in the hospital in the place. So the other dogs took no notice and just that dog was lying there. I made up a bed for him in the warm, loose box next to one where the other dog slept, and one arrangement was made for the dog. For 2 days, I kept an eye on him. For 2 days, the dog was kept on observation, giving him no food, but plenty of water. That's where the dieting started. For 2 odd days, got no meal, just water, water, water. Plenty of water. At the end of the second day, he started to show some interest. And just because he did not get anything for 2 days to eat, just had a lot of water, he became little active. He started taking some interest in the surrounding. On the third day, he began to whimper, make noise that I want to be out of the box. When he heard the dogs in the yard. When I opened the door, Tricky trotted out, was immediately engulfed by Joe. And as soon as this dog came out, Joe, the other greyhound dog, and his friend just, rushed towards the dog. And after rolling over him and thoroughly inspecting him, the dogs moved off down the garden. All the dogs just again came and then rolled down over him, and then the other dogs ran to the garden. Now what will this dog Tricky do? Tricky followed them, rolling slightly with the surplus fat. Now Tricky for him is excessively, surplus means excessive fat. He still tried to follow these dogs in the garden. Later that day, I was present at the feeding time. I watched when Tristan slopped the food into the bowl. Tristan is the attendant who is serving the dogs, put the food in the bowls for the dogs. There was little usual headlong rush followed by the sound of high speed eating, and the dog started eating very fast. Every dog knew that if he fell behind, he will have to be taking trouble to have been liable to have some competition for the last part of meal, and the dogs ate very fast. When they finished, Tricky took a walk around and at the shining. Tricky was not in habit to fight for food, yet he was getting a lot. He had no that practice of taking food quickly, and when everybody finished eating, Tricky just went to the bowl and started sniffing, licking whatever left out thing was left in the bowl. Next day, an extra bowl was put for him, and I was pleased to see him jostling his way towards it. And he started jostling means made efforts and went there to the bowl. Next day, a separate bowl was kept for Tricky. From then on, his progress was rapid, and then he started improving because he's getting less food and lot of exercise, so naturally he's becoming little active. He had no medicinal treatment of any kind, but all day he ran about with the dogs. He did a lot of running, joining in their friendly scrimmages, their shoutings and all that, in their games. He discovered the joy of being bowled over, trammed on and squashed in every few minutes. All these movements which dogs do, they roll and jump and all that. He started joining them. He became an accepted member of the gang, and now the pack of the dogs, the gang, accepted him also because he's now moving. The first time when this dog came, the other dogs took no interest in him because this dog was just lying listless. But now, when he became active, the other dogs started taking interest in him. Among the shaggy crew, fighting like a tiger for a share of meal times and hunting rats in the old hen house at night. So all the dogs would do all these activities. Even this dog, Tricky, also joined them in all these activities. He had never had such a time in his life. Tricky was so isolated, so dull dog, but now he's enjoying his life because he had got so energetic, routine now. All the while, Mrs. Pumphrey hovered anxiously in the background, ringing a dozen times a day for the latest bulletin. And meanwhile, this improvement is taking place in the dog's life and physique. Mrs. Pumphrey would just be, calling the doctor at least 12 times a day. 15 times a day. Sir, tell me how is he now? And just after 2 hours, sir, please tell me the latest update. That's why the latest bulletin term is humorously used here. Okay. And this lady would just be asking for, sir, how is the health of the dog? I dodged the question and he did not answer the question. Unnecessary questions. Whether his cushions were being turned or coat was okay, whether coat was put, he did not pay attention to any kind of questions. That cushions and all that was, the doctor said, everything is okay, just don't worry. But I was able to tell her that little fellow was out of danger, your dog is out of danger and convulsing rapidly and improving, showing little improvement now. The word convulsing seemed to do something to Mrs. Pumphrey. She started to bring round fresh. As soon as this doctor said that your dog is improving, is gaining good health now, the very next day, this lady had sent eggs, wines, and everything. She started to bring round fresh eggs, 2 dozen at a time, to build up Tricky's strength. Sir, now please, he must be feeling sick. Just let him gain health, get good eggs and all that. For a happy period of my partners, I had 2 eggs each for breakfast. The eggs which were brought for the dog were not given to the dog, because if they give excess of food, again the dog will become same sick and dull and lazy. So whatever eggs were brought, edibles were brought by Mrs. Pumphrey, everything was eaten by these local people only. But when the bottle of wine began to arrive, the real possibility of the situation began to dawn in the household. And then it was to enrich Tricky's blood. Lunch became a ceremonial occasion with 2 glasses. So, that drink was brought by Mrs. Pumphrey for the dog, but then the doctor and the companions used to take it, 2 glasses of wine before and several during meals. We could hardly believe it when the brandy came to put a final edge. And finally, this lady brought brandy. And then the doctor took and the entire staff took that brandy. For a few nights, the fine spirit was rolled around, inhaled and reverently drunk. And they, with a sense of majesty, wow, we're taking. But it was actually meant for the dog. That lady, out of care and compassion and love, brought for the dog. But they did not give anything to dog because it would harm the dog's health. And they themselves consumed it. They were days of deep content, starting well with the extra egg in the morning, improved and sustained by the midnight wine, and finishing luxuriously round the fire with the brandy. And they had a gala time. They're getting eggs because of this dog. They're getting wine also because of this dog. They're even getting brandy because of this dog. And the doctor believed that not for 15 days, this dog should be kept for the treatment for the whole life, so that all these things keep coming. It was a temptation to keep Tricky on permanent guest, but I knew Mrs. Pumphrey was suffering and after a fortnight felt compelled to phone and tell her that the little dog had recovered and was awaiting collection. And after 15 days, the doctor told that your dog is all okay now, please collect. Within minutes, about 30 feet of gleaming black metal drew up, which is car. Within minutes, the car came outside the surgery. The chauffeur, the driver, opened the door, and I could just make out the figure of Mrs. Pumphrey, almost lost in interior. Her hands were tightly clasped in front of her, and her lips trembled. Oh, Mr. Harrod, do tell me the truth. Is he really better? And even from the car, from the inside of the car, only this lady is asking, Sir, tell me, how is my baby? Are you telling the truth that my baby is all okay? The dog, yes, he's fine. There is no need for you to get out of the car. I will go and fetch him. Don't worry, you don't get out of the car, ma'am. I will go and bring your dog, the doctor said. I walked through the house into the garden. A mass of dogs was hurtling round and round the lawn in their midst, ears flapping, tail waving, and the little golden figure of Tricky. And then, other than Tricky, there were other dogs also with their great movements came. In 2 weeks, he had been transformed into a light, hard, muscled animal, very slanky, fit dog, Light means a fit dog. This dog has become so fit now, slanky, and nice, good appearance, fit dog. He was keeping up well with the pack. Pack means the other group. He was keeping very well now. First day he did not even move, but now he is becoming the partner with enthusiasm. All these dogs, stretching out in great bounds, his chest almost brushing the ground. I carried him back to the passage in front of the house. The chauffeur was still holding the car door open when Tricky saw his mistress. So Tricky just went inside as soon as the dog saw the lady, and he started licking, and he was happy to receive the mistress again. Sailed into Mrs. Pumphrey's lap. She gave him start. Oh, and then had to defend herself as she swarmed her over her, licking her face and barking. During the excitement, I helped the chauffeur to bring out the beds, and all that, toys and everything that Mrs. Pumphrey had sent were again sent back in the car. Coats and bowls, and none of which had been used. No, nothing was used because the dog was getting a normal treatment. As the car moved away, Mrs. Pumphrey leaned out of the window, and Mrs. Pumphrey just, happily looked out of the window when the car was moving, taking Tricky back home. Tears were in her eyes, lips trembled. Oh, Mr. Harrod, she cried, how can I ever thank you? What a surgery you have done. This is a triumph. Triumph means victory. You are a real surgeon. You have done something very good, doctor. I don't know how to thank you. And with this, the car took Tricky away. But you know that there was no surgery. There was no medical treatment given. It was just cutting on diet as well as exercise that transformed that dog. So that is the end of the story, Triumph of Surgery, which tells that excessive love can sometimes be harmful. Dear viewers, I end the story here on this note. Thank you so much.